Hello everybody, welcome to my channel as always. It's been a minute since I did my last video, and I figured I would do another Beatles solo album, or as I like to say, post-breakup Beatles album. But the one I want to do, and I kind of held off on this one, I see a lot of reviews of this one on YouTube, and I tried to hold off on this one, but Fab 4 Free For All, if any of you guys are fans of the podcast, and if you're not, I encourage you to listen to it and join their Facebook group. They did an episode analyzing this album. They did a part 1, part 2, and they did a really awesome job, and it kind of inspired me to finally tackle this one. So, talk about John Lennon and Yoko Ono's 1972 album, and I have to count, well, yeah, sometime in New York City. Please forgive that title there, and I'll get to that. This is the 2010 CD remaster. If any of you hear the podcast, they delve into the historical background of this album and what was going on in John's life at this time. We really don't have that much time to delve into it, but I will say that John and Yoko, they moved to New York, and the first people to eagerly meet them in New York, it wasn't a Leonard Bernstein, it wasn't a Miles Davis, it wasn't anybody in the arts world, it was Abbie Hoffman and Jerry Rubin. But I want to talk about the album that was a result of that. A double album, basically kind of like a son of All Things Must Pass, where All Things Must Pass was technically a double album that had a bonus jam album in there, but I think George always considered it a double. This technically was a single album with a bonus live jam album, but still sold at double album price. But this was a rather political album for John and Yoko, talking about various topics, from the Attica State prison riots to John Sinclair, who was a White Panther and was in jail for 2 marijuana joints. Honestly, my opinion of the album is that some of the lyric writing I think is lazy. The production is great. How much it, again, co-produced by Phil Spector, but how much of it is Phil Spector, how much of it is John? The songs are throwaway songs. And I know the concept of the album was supposed to be a newspaper. And the theory is, you like a newspaper, you read the articles, and then you throw it away. So maybe he deliberately tried to write some throwaway songs. We're going to hear it at this moment, and then, he wants you to toss the album away. Is that the theory? I don't know. The strange thing about this is that Yoko's songs on this album are much more universal and, I have to say, better songs. The album starts off with a song titled "Woman is the N-Word of the World." I'm not going to say the whole title. He did not mean the N-word in racial terms. He meant it in the fact that woman is the slave of the slaves. He says that later on in the song. Maybe he could have said something else. That's probably the best song on the album here from John, I feel. That's followed by Yoko's Sisters Oh Sisters, which is a universal theme, which I actually kind of like that song. Attica State is another one that I just think the lyrics are totally irresponsible in there. But then again, Yoko with another universal song, Born into Prison. She's talking about the prisons that we all face as individuals. I take back what I said earlier about Woman is the N-Word of the World being John's best song in this album. I take that back. New York City, Close Aside 1. That's one of Lennon's best. That really goes into detail on what he and Yoko were going through when they got to New York. And it's up there with Ballad of John and Yoko, as far as John taking his real life and putting it into a rockin' song. John Sinclair and Angela, about Angela Davis. Now, they were both released from prison by the time the album came out. I mean, there was a delay in the album. By the time the album did come out, they were released from prison. So when John is singing on John Sinclair, you got to set him free. He's already been set free. So maybe he should have gone back before the album came out and edited in a new verse about John being free. I don't know. Something I want to know. There's a lyric, and they didn't reprint it on the lyric sheet here. he says in the song, the chorus is, they gave him 10 for 2. What else could the judges do? They got to, but at one part he goes, they gave him 10 for 2, and they got Ollie Otis too. Who the hell is Ollie Otis? I looked it up everywhere. There's nothing out there about Ollie Otis except referencing the John Sinclair lyric. And that's followed by Angela Davis, or Angela. You know, Angela, they put you in prison. Angela, they shot down your man. Angela, you're one of the millions of political prisoners in the world. Well, tell me something I don't know. I know she was one of the millions of political prisoners in the world. And then just the chorus, the lyrics here, just, they gave you sunshine, they gave you sea, they gave you everything but the jailhouse key. Well, she's in jail, they're not going to give her the jailhouse key. I mean, I agree, but the Stones did a better, I mean, it's in the Stones canon, it's not a great tune, but if you're going to match up songs, on Exile on Main Street, Sweet Black Angel, which was about Angela Davis, is a better tune. And then followed, closing the studio side here, We're All Water, another great jam by Yoko. And just, it's a punk rock tune on that song. I mean, there may not be much difference between Chairman Mao and Richard Nixon if we strip them naked. Basically, we're all the same thing. We are all the same thing. Another universal song from Yoko. That is followed by the live jam side. Side 1 of the live jam was recorded in '69 at the Lyceum Theater, I think it is, with members of Delaney and Bonnie and Friends. George Harrison was among them. Eric Clapton was among them. Also Keith Moon on drums, and a cast of thousands. It's another version of Cold Turkey, which I kind of like that. I think it's okay. The studio version of that and Live Peace in Toronto's version of that is still better. And then a rather cacophonous version of Don't Worry Kyoko. I don't even know why, if it even is Don't Worry Kyoko, because I've heard different versions of Don't Worry Kyoko and this doesn't sound like it. I like her intro, You Killed Hanratty, You Murderer. Look that incident up, but that was pretty much relevant to that time, about Hanratty. Thing is, that goes on for like 11, 12 minutes, and it really gets rather boring. I do like the call and response effect between Yoko and Bobby Keys on sax. And then it brings us to side 2 of the live jam side, or side 4, mind you, on a double album. The controversial side. This is Frank Zappa's compilation Playground Psychotics, with the 1971-72 era of the Mothers of Invention with Flo and Eddie. They were recording at the Fillmore that night, and Frank asked John to come and jam. So side 4 is the jam between John and Yoko and the Mothers of Invention. The first track, Baby Please Don't Go, is a great groove song. The second song, and this is where the controversial stuff happens. Zappa gave John the multi-track master and said, you do your version, I'll do my version. This recording has the mix the way it should be. And I say that because the following song is called Jam Rag on Sometime in New York City, credited to John Lennon and Yoko Ono. That song is actually King Kong by Frank Zappa. John felt the need to change the song and claim it as his own, and he and Yoko got the publishing on their album. That anybody who's a Zappa fan and a Mothers of Invention fan knows that song. It originally appeared on the Uncle Meat album. Zappa never sued. Being a Beatles fan, I will say Zappa had every right to sue, because that was not a song called Jam Rag. There's no song called Jam Rag. John took King Kong and retitled it Jam Rag and credited it as a Lennon-Ono composition. No. That was total crap on John's part, in my opinion. Followed by another jam tune called Scumbag, which that is credited as Lennon-Ono Zappa. On Lennon's version, they mute Howard Kaylan or Eddie of Flo and Eddie, all we hear on Lennon's version is scumbag, scumbag. That's it. There's a Howard Kaylan is ad-libbing some lyrics. Scumbag, I'll put up my dirty movies in a scumbag. And at one point he goes, we'll put Yoko Ono in a scumbag. All that is missing from John's version. You hear somebody saying something faintly, like it sounds like he's off mic. On Zappa's version, he has it back and forth. And then that's followed by a rather pointless ad-lib by Yoko, which on Zappa's version he titled A Small Eternity with Yoko Ono. The live jam side was not necessary. I think the songs could have been better for John. It's worth to hear as a curio where his mind was at the time. It's worth to hear for the historical significance of what was actually going on at the time in Lennon's life. So in that, it's a great, I would say it's a document of Lennon, but as an overall album, he and Paul around the same time did, I think, their worst post-Beatles albums. I know some people will go later on and say Press to Play or whatever, but in the wake of the Beatles breakup, I say Sometime in New York City and Wildlife are weak albums. But they started to get their act back together again. Paul with Red Rose Speedway, the Wings album, in my opinion, I think it's a solid album. And then John with Mind Games. Not perfect, but solid, which would get him to Walls and Bridges after that. Sometime in New York City, definitely a flawed album, but it's worth to hear as a document of what John was going through at the time. And thank you so much, everybody. Thank you for sticking with me. I will be doing some more videos. I'll be doing a lot more unedited stuff because I'm currently editing a project on Final Cut. And until we meet again.